Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Module 3, Understanding Communication Models, Theories, and the History of the Profession. I'm Joan D'Amico. I'm also an APR, and I'll be your technical facilitator for this webcast. And I'm so thrilled to be part of your APR journey, as are the other APRs that are on the panel tonight. So we have a packed hour for you. We're very fortunate to have three volunteers this evening for the scenario-based question, the notes, as well as a case presentation. And are any of you out there getting ready to do your panel presentation? Because if you are, you'll definitely want to pay attention to the panel presentation or the case study. I use them interchangeably. The panel presentation is typically a project that you worked on, and a case study is usually something that you pull off the shelf. If you go to the back of the APR guide, you'll find several different off the shelf, as we call them, case studies. So let's just jump in and start with your participation. Tell us in the chat, what model or theory did you read about in this week's readings? Or it could be a theory that perhaps you use on the job. So go ahead and introduce yourself just by placing in the chat different types of theories. Think about them now, because these will definitely, even though this is only 5% of the test, there are a lot of theories that really help us to be more effective communicators. And when you know how to use them and you're more aware of them, you'll be surprised. We probably use a lot of these every day and just don't realize it. And now that you're reading about it, you're like, that makes sense. Or you might think that, oh, maybe if I had used two-way symmetrical versus two-way asymmetrical, I would have had a better outcome. Excellent. So now we're seeing diffusion. Yes, that's a great one. Wilbur Schramm, agenda setting theory. Yes. Two-way symmetric, diffusion. Yes. Excellent. Excellent. And if you didn't have an opportunity to do the readings, this is a great place to catch up on it. And you'll have an opportunity, as we've always said, the course is for you to study at your own pace. So now that we've all signed in, I want to just mention that some people ask, they're not academics, and when you start talking about, models and theories, it sounds very didactic. But when you think about it, we do this every day, and our panelists are going to help us understand how these communication theories, practices, models really do apply to the RPI. And for those of you who might be new to the course, RPI stands for research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. That's really the heart and soul of the APR. And next week, you're going to start into the RPI process. But for now, let's focus on communication, understanding those theories. Now, as I mentioned, it's only 5%, but it is the foundation of strategy. So when you start looking at the models and theories, they help you understand what the best strategy will be in order to be more effective in your program or in your communications. They're also in use when you think about your audience. Which of those communication models, which is the framework, and then the theory, which is how you apply that framework, which of those would be best suited to your audience. So again, even though it seems like it's not a lot, it really is something that we use every day, and it does make a difference, and you can apply what you learn here right on the job. So I am thrilled to have three wonderful APRs. Jara Sturdivant Wilson. Jara is a new APR, so we're going to have her fresh perspective on just coming off the computer-based exam. We also have Holly McCaw and April Turner, who are two seasoned APRs with us. So, Jara, I'm going to start with you. If you wouldn't mind just sort of introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your experience in taking the computer-based exam.
Of course, thank you. I am sitting in my desk that I studied a ton in. All my notes are still here, and it has been several months since I did pass, but I also didn't pass the first time. And I have continued to love and grow to really appreciate the fundamentals that the APR really achieves to make sure you understand it. And the mentors and the mentees and the peers I've met along the way have made the whole presentation, the whole opportunity great. I want to say, if you're in the process right now, I'm so excited for you because I had a dream about this last night, and I'm doing some mentoring for some people, but it's so worth it. And I can remember the moment I passed, and now no looking back at that, appreciate all the teaching and the guidance that was provided by all the different panelists and the mentors. So I'm really, really excited.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you. Holly, how about sharing a little bit about your journey? Hey, Holly, are you on mute?
So sorry.
Oh,
Took
there you
my
go.
camera off and didn't take the mute off. Well, hi everyone. So good to see you. Thanks again for having me back. I earned my APR in June of 2021. So it has been a little bit. Already had to do the renewal once, so that's nice. But my journey started even much before that. So I was kind of one of those that have been interested for a really long time and signed up for this course, and I was going to do it, and I was kind of a deer in headlights for the first at least cohort or two. And I had two young kids, very busy. But I will be honest, looking back, I think I let that get in the way, because it kind of got to the point, and Joan, you were a huge help just getting me over the finish line. It's like, here we go, we can do this. I think a lot of it comes from the confidence, right? We
Yeah.
all look to do this to better ourselves and get ourselves a little bit more confident in what we're doing every day. And the truth is, you can do this. So just stick with it. It took me it did take me 3 years, but absolutely worth it. And I did want to make sure too. I felt really comfortable with the material. I was not trained in public relations. I came from a journalism background, and so a lot of it terminology wise was new, but you guys do know this stuff. You're doing it every day. So it's just applying the process that the APR teaches you.
Great. Well, we're so happy to have you with us too, Holly. And April, it's good to see another familiar face. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure. I finished the APR in November 2019. I'll never forget that because a few months later, COVID. And I went to Ohio. I did one of the boot camp weekends. So that is where you're studying. You need to go into the boot camp. It's a 3-day experience. You go in with all your tools that you study with, but you are doing your panel presentation and your test during that weekend. It also took me a few years to finish the APR, not because it takes that long, but I took this class and I was like, wow, this is a lot. This is overwhelming. And I thought it was too hard. And the local college that I teach at asked me to start teaching the PR course. And I started teaching it. And this is my textbook. It is Tom Keller. It is actually one of your recommended books for you to study for this exam. And after I taught it, a light bulb went off. I was like, oh, I get this now because I had to study it to teach it. So my tip is for anyone studying for this, what you all are, is to attack it as if you have to teach it, and it will become a different thing for you. So I'm so happy to be APR. It's been a great experience. And someone in the chat asked, do I recommend boot camp? I do, but I enjoyed that route, but also to remember you're not going in one weekend to do it all in one weekend. You would have studied and prepped before you got there. It's not a crash course, if you
That's
will.
an excellent point. That
Yeah.
yeah, you can't just show up at boot camp and cram all this. I appreciate your story because I think I've heard that deer in the headlights. I've heard that overwhelming so many times, and it truly is overwhelming at first. And everybody's felt that. We've all sat in your seat, and we know what it feels like. But eventually, as April mentioned, that light bulb just goes off, and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, now I get it." So, for some of us, we've been practicing for a number of years, and we had to unlearn things that were sort of bad habits, if you will. But now it's just a different way of thinking, but it's so much easier and more effective. So let's start in with our scenario practice question. And we have a great volunteer this evening, Laura Flores McCusker. And Laura, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and reading your question for us.
Okay. You work in public relations at a healthcare organization and have been asked to help increase enrollment in a new service that will deliver medications to patients prior to discharge. This is important because most people who leave the hospital do not fill their prescriptions and return to the hospital's crowded emergency department for care. What two approaches would be most effective in increasing enrollment in the new program?
Okay, so let's let Laura read all 4 possible responses before we start to put our answers in the chat. Laura?
What two approaches would be most effective in increasing enrollment in the new program? Choose two. Emailing patients who have recently been discharged from the hospital and have agreed to receive targeted email communications, announcing the new program in the hospital magazine, which is printed and mailed to residents in the area. The story would run with a QR code that links to a giveaway opportunity. C, having nurses and pharmacists discuss the information with patients during their stay. And D, working with a health reporter on a story about the program.
Okay, everyone. So let's see which 2 answers, best answers, 2 best answers. Okay, we have a lot of A's and C's, a couple of contrarians in the group, C's and D's. Excellent. This is good. It'll be good for discussion. Okay, keep going. Yep, and more A and C. Okay. Well, Laura, let's see what the answer should be. Laura?
A and C.
Excellent.
Emailing patients and having the one-on-one discussion with patients during their stay.
Okay, and if you wouldn't mind reading the rationale, this is the best part because this actually shows you how your thought process to come to that conclusion. Go ahead, Laura.
The rationale is with so many messages trying to capture our attention, communicators need to use as many channels as possible to reach our intended audience to get them to act. A hospital stay is likely a triggering event for individuals, so they are more active, captive audience ready to take action. The most effective outreach tactics are those that are targeted in their approach, such as an email and one-on-one conversations with credible sources, who are in this case nurses and pharmacists.
Excellent. So April, let's start with you. Can you any comments on either the structure of the question or the answer?
No, thank you. And thank you, Laura, for the question. That was a great question. And I'm curious for my colleagues. I love the question. Definitely when I read it first, also came to the agency conclusion, but I also thought about the fact that this is not a gotcha exam. You definitely study everything that you need to know. And I would wondering if perhaps there should be something that leads that the research led you to that, not just so that there's a process here that we go through before we jump to tactics and conclusions, and was wondering if that was part of the question, perhaps that would lead you better to the road of picking A and C.
Okay, good point. To learn a little bit more about the strategy behind it. Holly, what about you? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually, April, that's a really good point because when I first read it, I thought, oh, okay, I wonder what research tactics are going to be in the answers. And it ended up being after that. So I could definitely see the question potentially being research shows that, what are your next steps to reach your audience? So the question itself might be worded a little bit different because we always start with research, right, with our pie. But I really liked this question because it really made you think. All 4 are great things to do, right, to help get the word out. But which 2 are going to be the most effective? And that's where you really think about these communication models and theories where you need to know your audience and you need to really think about what's going to be the most effective in reaching them and getting them to hear the message. So I thought that was a great question.
Good. And Jara, anything to add to that?
Read slowly. I am one who reads quickly, and this test does require you, if you can, read out loud, you can't. I got in trouble. The person who was facilitating it said can't talk, but I thought, oh, A would not be it at all because emailing patients, you shouldn't do that. And I skipped the second part. And so it is important to slow down at every single response and think through, all right, emailing patients, then to receive targeted email communications. That's a really big important part to it because you can't just email people, but if they have agreed to it, it's good to remember that part. So read slowly.
Excellent. So you're actually applying even more of what you learned when you look at the answers. Does that follow, what would be considered APR, best practice? Excellent. Well, thank you all. I'm going to ask now. We have Michelle who did a great job with the notes. She really picked apart the history of APR for us, and she's going to help make it a little bit easier to remember. And so go ahead there, Michelle. Are you on?
I am on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I had the video on as well, but
That's okay.
there we go. Hi, everyone. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the evolution of public relations in Chapter 2 of our Public Relations Strategies and Tactics. And if you'll move to slide 2, please. Whether as speeches, art, literature, interpersonal communication, staged event, or publicity, these public relations activities have been used since ancient times. In ancient empires, people have always sought ways to get their messages heard. As early as 499 BC, Herodotus wrote about the messages that were etched into stone to demoralize enemies during the Persian Wars, to messages of victories from Alexander the Great, the announcements about events such as the Olympic Games. Julius Caesar, the first politician to publish a book, Commentaries, and he also posted public notices called Daily Doings as the first newspaper, the first known newspaper anyway. The Apostle Paul, who is the most prolific writer of the New Testament, gained followers for Jesus through speeches, events, and activities, all things that we still use today. In the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church, through Pope Urban II, was so adept at public relation practices, he convinced more than 60,000 people to join the war in the Crusades. By 1450, a major shift in communications occurred, which we all know as the Gutenberg press, making publications to the public possible. The church also adopted corporate philanthropy in the 1600s, and then we move on to colonial America. As soon as the late 1500s, leaders were sending exaggerated descriptions about the beauty of the colonies and how rich the soil was and easy it was to live there to England to encourage more people to make the journey. There were land offers made through flyers and brochures to encourage migrations and fundraising through brochures directed at wealthy for institutions of learning like Harvard and King's College, now known as Columbia University. Influencers like Sam Adams, known as the father of press agentry, who founded the Sons of Liberty, organized the Boston Tea Party, which is known as the greatest publicity stunt of all time by PR Week. And he named the killing of 5 colonists who were provoking the British soldiers by throwing things at them, the Boston Massacre, which showed the power of words. Tom Paine also influenced colonists to declare independence through his persuasive 47-page common sense pamphlet. The Federalist Papers rallied support for the U.S. Constitution and laid the foundation still used today. We still use mass media opinion pieces, now frequently used in video form. That's the way we're doing it now. The golden age, slide 3, I'm sorry. The golden age of press agentry, feeding the appetite for entertainment to the masses, also known as the age of hype. Press agents excluded ethics and focused on exaggeration and even lying to gain audiences, creating heroes and personalities like Davy Crockett, Buffalo Bill, Annie Oakley, Daniel Boone, and others. Ethical constraints were scant and sometimes even non-existent. P.T. Barnum was a show businessman who knew how to use exaggeration, advertising, and publicity to attract a crowd hungry for amusement, and he understood the power of third-party endorsements. He could have a thriving YouTube channel in today's society. Westward expansion through land speculators and the railroads, again, exaggerated the descriptions of the land and opportunities through brochures, pamphlets, road shows, and other forms of publicity, successfully attracting more than 5 million people to migrate westward. Politics and social movements. Some notable leaders and movements include Amos Kendall, who was a Kentucky newspaper editor on Andrew Jackson's cabinet, and likely the first press secretary. He gathered public opinions and artfully wove Jackson's ideas into persuasive speeches and news releases. And you had the women's Christian temperance movement, through Annie Wittenmeyer and Frances Willard, who successfully used PR strategies with the media to ban alcohol and promote the suffrage movement. Anti-Saloon League of America used print media, lectures, and lobbying to ban the sales and consumption of alcohol. and Ida Wells, a former slave, and she was the original Rosa Parks who refused to give up her seat on a train 70 years prior to Rosa Parks. She used many public relations strategies to change public opinions in Europe and America. She owned and edited an anti-segregationalist newspaper. She wrote books, articles, gave persuasive speeches, and was one of the founders of the NAACP. Following her was John Muir. He was an environmentalist who used public relations campaigns to protect wilderness areas and establish national parks. Early corporate initiatives, John Wanamaker and Macy's, they used magazines and window displays, and events like the Macy's Parade are still happening today, and that brought awareness about and gained customers. Westing Corporation is believed to have established the first in-house publicity department, and in 1897, the term public relations was first used in a listing at the end of this era by the Association of American Railroads. Slide 4, please. 1900 to 1950, that was the age of pioneers, and we moved from press agentry into public relations. Ivy Lee brought professionalism to public relations. He was a former business journalist for the New York Times who became the first public relations counsel and opened a public relations firm called Parker & Lee in 1905. His emphasis was on the dissemination of truthful, accurate information, moving the field away from distortions, hype, and exaggerations. He had immense success with the Pennsylvania Railroad, convincing the railroad to use more open information policy and blitzing internal and external stakeholders with information, and a successful campaign for a 5% rate hike. He became the executive assistant to the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad and the first corporate PR executive. He also ran winning campaigns for J.D. Rockefeller, charitable organizations, and others. There are 4 important contributions to public relations that we continue to practice that he brought to us. One is advancing the concept that business and industry should align with public interest. 2, dealing with top executives and carrying out no programs without the support of management. 3 is maintaining open communication with the news media. And 4 is emphasizing the necessity of humanizing businesses and bringing its public relations to the community level of employees, customers, and neighbors. Unfortunately, his ethics were doubted when he was questioned by the U.S. Commission on Industrial Relations and stated that he did not even check any facts regarding derogatory information that he had publicized. Then we have Edward Bernays, the father of modern public relations, who brought social science research and behavioral psychology to the practice of PR. Side note, he was a cousin to Sigmund Freud, and he did that to formulate campaigns and messages that could change perceptions and encourage behaviors. What we know of today is 2-way asymmetrical model to listen for the purpose of sharing a persuasive message. He wrote the book Crystallizing Public Opinion. I don't know if that should be on our reading list, and was extremely successful with Procter & Gamble's Ivory Soap campaign and sales. Worth mentioning that there was a book written about him called The Father of Spin, and Life magazine listed him as one of the 100 most important people of the 20th century. And his partner in life was Doris Fleischman. She practiced PR and all that it entailed during the time right along with him. On pages 53, you can read about more notable public relations professionals such as George Creel, Arthur Page, and I won't go into all the other names, but they've all done they've done great things in the field of PR. Major contributions to the development of public relations by non-public relations practitioners were people such as Henry Ford, who was always accessible to the press, Samuel Insull, Chicago's Edison's company used mail stuffers to communicate with customers. President Theodore Roosevelt, he was a master at publicizing his pet projects. And Franklin Roosevelt, who hosted events to raise funds for infant paralysis research. Slide 5, please. Public relations comes to age. This is 1950 to 2000. The field of public relations became firmly established as an important part of America's economic, political, and social development. Rapid changes were occurring in urban and suburban populations. There was social unrest going on with the Vietnam War, civil and environmental movements. Mass media was expanding, there was economic growth occurring, and people felt a depersonalization from major companies and big government because things were changing so rapidly. By the 1980s, strategy was the emphasis, and businesses were focused on management by objective, MBO, and reputation management was stressed in the 1990s. Women in public relations, they dominated the field by the mid 1980s, with up to 70% of women in the field by 2000. The range for women as of 2023 is still between 63 and 70%. They tend to earn higher salaries in the PR field than they would in journalism and television, and they find the schedules more adaptive to their lifestyles. Men dominated the executive ranks and continue to lead the executive ranks, but the gap is closing. Slide 6, please. 2000 to the present, public relations enters the digital age. The traditional model of one-way communication is replaced with engagement and dialogue to build mutually beneficial relationships. Social media removes the filter of mass media, and anyone can become a publisher with a multitude of followers. Relationship management and marketing, moving from managing communication to an emphasis of communication as a tool to negotiating relationships. Now we have influencers who can reach out to millions of people at one time. If you go back to P.T. Barnum and the third-party endorsement, bad reviews can make or break a business. I mean, I think of the Stanley Cup and the rise and fall of that, how that just, I mean, that dissipated so quickly, the popularity did. Diversity in the workplace means that we need to look at different ways to communicate, and we must consider the world global economy. I'd like to point out on page 63 in the multicultural world section, it reads that China will surpass the US and become the world's largest economy by 2025. And although they are the world's second largest economy, they are far from surpassing the US at this point. Recruitment of diversity is more important than ever in public relations as our society grows and changes, and we still have a long way to go in the public relations field. Transparency builds trust, corporate social responsibility. There was a long time emphasis on this, but it seems as political values shift, so does the positioning in this area, just to bring it up to date. Slide 7, reflecting on insights, the social media reformation on page 41. I would say if you read that area, for lack of time, I won't go into it, but consider how that has changed with AI. And then the rise in public relations in other nations. We are not the only ones that have public relations. It is all over the world, and how the history behind those nations. There is a brief on that on page 45. The historical themes over the centuries are still used today. Profit motivates the public relation function. Recruitment, we work just like they did with the Catholic Church in recruiting people for the Crusades. We work to recruit people for our the different things that we have going on today. Legitimacy, third-party endorsements from those with influence, still used today from our influencers. Agitation, used to rally against public intoxication and gender discrimination. We use agitation today, just still to rally people. And then advocacy, we work with others to advocate for different movements, social movements that may be, or for products as well. And then reflecting on some of the insights you'll see in different areas, like page 57, we have press agentry. So this goes back to the models, the 4 classic models: press agentry and publicity. That's one-way communication, primarily through mass media to distribute info that is exaggerated, distorted, or incomplete. Then you have public information, which is one-way distribution of information, not necessarily with a persuasive intent, but it is based on accuracy and completeness, and it uses mass media. I think today, though, I know it ended there with the mass media, but we would also, any organization would also share that on their social media platforms. And then you have two-way asymmetric feedback is used to better understand and persuade the audience. This approach has imbalanced effects. The feedback loop for the communicator is to persuade. And then two-way symmetric, gaining mutual understanding for balanced effects between the organization and the public. Communication is two-way and balanced in this model. Informative research is used to understand how the publics perceive the organization and determine how the organization affects the public. Done. Okay.
Excellent job. Well, everyone, let's give Michelle a big hand. That was excellent. I really appreciate that. all the work that you did into that.
Thank you.
Excellent job. And you sort of made it easy for everybody. So now we understand what the history is. I don't know that you need to know everything about the history, but definitely some of those names like Ivy Lee and some of the others that Michelle mentioned. Okay, we have a wonderful case study, so I don't want to waste any more time talking about it because Michael has done a terrific job. Michael Gordon, why don't you unmute yourself and share your case study? And this is an off-the-shelf case study, folks, that you'll find in the back of the APR guide. Over to you, Michael.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Thank you.
Very good. Blue Ridge has been a water provider for more than 45 years. The community has experienced some very rapid growth. There is a need for infrastructure improvements and upgrades to the system, but the customer capacity to pay for those increases is strained. There is a perceived disconnect between Blue Ridge, the water provider, and the community that they serve. Before going further down the path of rate increases to accommodate the infrastructure improvements, Blue Ridge wants to address the perceptions of their relationship with the community. Next slide, please. So for research, I conducted primary research using customer surveys with customers and secondary research assessing corporate and employee community involvement. In addition, I conducted primary qualitative research through informal surveys of school and government agencies. Next slide, please. There were three key findings that really set us on that path of making sure of what the relationship was with the community. The first one was 90% of those surveyed thought that the water services were tax supported. 51% could not recall the company name who provides their water without assistance. And 25% of those surveyed thought trash was included in the service. Next slide, please. And one more problem statement. The customers of North Virginia do not recognize Blue as a service provider in the community, nor do they understand how those services are funded or the implications of rapid regional growth on the utility provider. There's also a lack of association with Blue employees as involved in the community. So our goal, customers of North Virginia will recognize Blue as a contributing business in the community who delivers quality water services as well as being an active corporate citizen. You can imagine there are quite a list of publics that are involved in this process. I have listed them here on the screen, but the key ones that I will focus on for the rest of this presentation will be the employees of Blue. So our objectives. Blue leadership and board of directors will prioritize areas of focus for corporate contributions and volunteerism initiatives within the first month. It was very important that from the very beginning that we established that leadership needs to set the tone, and some of our strategies and tactics will flow out of the objective of having the leadership have an objective. You can also see where there's some objectives related to employee engagement, as well as participation in the community. Next slide, please. So our strategies. Keeping the strategies very simple: raise awareness and educate community stakeholders, promote brand recognition, engage employees in community opportunities that align with Blue philanthropic priorities, and cultivate increased accessibility to Blue resources. Next slide, please. So in terms of our messaging, we're your Blue. Water is just the beginning. The tactics. Here we take the objectives and our strategies and align them with some specific tactics. There are some key themes of the tactics. First of all, you'll notice budget resources, time to volunteer or complete community service projects, marketing items to give away on education tours, time to serve on boards, time to engage with stakeholders like chambers of commerce and board members, local, state, and elected officials. There's also a need to promote volunteerism and community involvement from the top leadership down, which means providing an agency tour to learn about organizations, offer board training to prepare employees interested in service for what they would be involved in. There's also strategic involvement that's listed here. with other business leaders and decision makers. We need to make sure that Blue leadership, Blue volunteers are interacting with other chamber members, other business leaders, other decision makers in the community so that there's association recognition with Blue as at the table. And then, of course, there is an introduction of a Blue Connects program that really is speaking to the cultural shift. We want it to not be an afterthought of Blue being involved in the community, but truly a part of the expectation of when you're a part of Blue, you do find a place to fit in the community through volunteerism, whether or not you're on a board, or also just being involved in the tours that we're providing at the facility. I did break down the, based on the objective, strategy and tactics for each one of the 3 objectives that were listed. If you'll move forward one more. And then one more. So in terms of cost, this is a new department, so clearly there has to be an investment to make sure that there is a priority for that community engagement. As we work through this first year process, we'll see, do we need more than one person? Do we need to add a second person to carry out all of the initiatives that we have with the engagement with the community, with those relationship building? Because it's more than giving away trinkets and providing tours. It's relationship building. We have our long game is to make sure that we can continue to support the growth of our water facilities, to support the growth in the community, and there's a price tag associated with that. Next slide, please. Next slide. Before our timetable, in lieu of time tonight, I just wanted to focus on a couple of things. Early decisions on budget and the lanes of which our priorities for Blue to be involved will be key to help direct employees to organizations that align with where we want to go. Messaging and the pace of our communication externally, we are very safety conscious and conservation conscious. We can carry those messages out into the community, but we also need to make sure that we're introducing the people of Blue to our community so that there's that connection of not just the water provider, they could be my neighbor. If the community knows an employee, they're more likely to know Blue. Cultivation of relationships with decision makers takes time. The multitude of engagements in the community and the tours will provide a framework for Blue to better understand the community priorities and pain points, and for the community to also understand Blue's priorities and maybe even some of our pain points. Is Blue holding back on the expansion of existing businesses due to our infrastructure constraints? Is Blue holding back on new investment from coming to the community because of the infrastructure constraints? What are some of the shared constraints that Blue may have with other businesses, other utility providers in the region? Could there be shared workforce and training issues? That's where some of these cultivating those relationships comes into play. Through these relationships, might there be access to other funding mechanisms like grants, federal grants, or travel assistance for infrastructure that we can capitalize on and bring relief to our ratepayers? So in terms of the evaluation of our objectives, there will be another survey with customers to check for improvements within the 12 months. Those 3 questions that I indicated at the very beginning were shocking to our company. So we want to come back in a year and just see, do they recognize Blue for the services that we provide? Can they relate to how we are funded? And do they know that we're not, we don't deliver trash service, we're water. What are the other leaders and decision makers saying about Blue in discussions on growth, attraction, and expansion? Is Blue at the table? Are Blue leaders serving in the community leadership roles? Are we helping make community decisions, not just Blue decisions? What percentages of employees are volunteering? That is something that we can keep a running tally on and of course set some targets, but first year, second year, and ongoing. What percentages of employees are achieving the Community Connects grants? Those were grants specifically that if our employees are participating in 40 hours of volunteer service to a 501c organization, the company can provide a modest grant and provide some recognition for those employees. That would, again, bring awareness and connectivity in the community. What participation and feedback are present from schools touring our facilities, from employees participating in the tours? It doesn't have to be the same 3 employees providing those tours. We want to see how many others we can involve. What increased engagement is happening with Blue, such as social media likes, shares, and comments. And you can see I added a few other specific evaluation objectives, but due to time, just want to give you the highlights.
This is great, Michael, and I apologize. Is this an actual project you worked on, or was this from a case study, the Blue Ridge Water one?
It was taken off of Blue Ridge off the
Okay.
shelf.
Okay, good. Because you sound so confident. I'm like, wow, this must have been his. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for, there's a lot of time and prep that goes into this. So everyone, let's give Michael a huge round of applause for taking the time to really build this. And I want to turn now to our APRs. And Holly, let's start with you on this one. Can you explain to the group, what the case presentation is? Is it the same as or similar to a panel presentation? Let's have an understanding of that, and then and go into any other comments you might have had.
Okay. So it is similar in that it's nice to do one of these case studies first that isn't so near and dear to your heart, so you can really work the process and really go through that 10-step process of, what is formulating that problem statement, for, looking at what research you could do. It really kind of, I think it really helps you think outside the box. Because it's almost like it's a problem you haven't tackled yet. And so, Michael, that was absolutely fantastic. You really put a lot of thought into that, and I'd be like, that could work. So, Blue Ridge needs to hire you. But yeah, they're definitely similar, and I'm guessing, Joan, that's why you do, and Michael too, really kind of push people to do that case study first, really get the feel of that process, and get the feel of how to write those objectives and how to line them all up. And then when you work on something of your own, it makes a little bit more sense. I think the only couple of things that I had a comment on, I thought the goal was great. Your objectives could be a little tightened up to make sure you did the who does what by how much and when. And Joy typed something in, and I was thinking the same thing too. Think about who you want to make that change, right? So go back to your goal of, you really want the people of the town to see them as a community contributor. So what do you want the people to do? What do you want their movement to be? And then the timetable and the tasks, I like how you really broke all of that down. It might be easier visually, so when you do your own project and come up with the same thing, maybe putting it in a Gantt chart or a table of some sort, just to follow that process along. I'll let the other two make some comments too, but really overall, nice job. I love all the evaluation too. You really nailed that.
Jero, what about you? Can you talk a little bit about coming fresh off the APR? Is there anything about the format of objectives or goal, anything that you saw in there that you might have made changes to?
Great question. First, really great job. I really thought you worked with Blue, and I thought, wow, this is spectacular. What I really appreciated, I was looking at my own notes, is just a lot of what you went back to is the fundamentals of public relations, which is the mutually beneficial relationship. And I thought like that it wasn't overt, like this is why I'm doing this, but it was really, it like was a nice thread throughout everything. And I think that's important to remember, that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You could certainly do the asymmetrical way of telling you what to do, but I thought it was really nice that it seemed like it was mutually beneficial. The other part was, I really appreciated that it was very thorough. And as someone who went through the process recently, the case study is a perfect way to really dig down into the intent of each portion. The panel presentation, which I did, I finished that and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so good. I can take the test. That made me feel good. It was not accurate of an accurate evaluation of how I would have done. And the case study just makes you slow down a lot and really understand. And so looking at all the case studies in the style guide, or excuse me, the style book, it's really helpful because it really lays it out really easily. So if you're the person who is studying, who's getting ready, don't shy away from looking at those in the back of that portion of the, I have my study guide behind me. Don't ever hesitate to that, because that's there for you to help. That is there to help you. But the panel presentation is also really fun, and a lot of things that you can practice with both. So hopefully that answered a bit of the question. But I really thought I worked there.
Good. Good. And April,
Yes.
what do you have to add to that? I feel like you come from you seem to have an academia
Mhm.
background. So now putting your academia hat on, what advice might you have for Michael?
This was great, Michael. My students do communication plans every semester. You would get an A. It was amazing. I totally agree. With my colleagues, I definitely also agree just about making sure those objectives are really, really tight. As someone now who sits and receives panel presentations, I sit and do them now. That is what trips up people the most. And but this is just a stellar presentation, how it's laid out. I too was like, oh wow, you did this campaign. And this is the time to sit in front of this panel and they want to know that you really know your stuff, that you know this process. And I think that this showed us that you do. You get a lot of time with them. And after you present, they'll ask you questions and they'll grill and go through all of these things with you. So that's the next part of preparation after you get ready for your panel presentation. But this is a really, really great job.
Thank you. And another question I wanted to ask the panelists, and since you're up, April, I'll ask this of you first. Like, how much time did you spend studying for preparing for the exam?
That's a good question. That was the summer of 2019, and I'm laughing. I'm thinking about I was traveling all over the place, and I still have my notes in my textbook, and they are so bent. And they went with me to Europe. They went with me everywhere. I was on planes like, okay, I'm gonna do it this time. So a lot. And every free moment I got, whether it was commuting to work on the train or like I said, it was flying to Europe. I had notes. That study guide is really, really good, and I'm knowing it back and forth. And like I said, the textbooks that they recommend and study guide, they are written by APRs and they are books that are taught in college classrooms. They are very good books and they help with some of the meat that bringing out examples, as you saw in the our first presentation, bringing it all to life and understanding people's names and other things. So yeah, a lot, I would say. So probably for that year, whenever I got a free moment, I just made sure I had my materials with me and I pulled it out and I would sit and study.
Thank you for that. Jara, what about you for the other candidates on the call? What would you say was your, say, average weekly amount of time that you spent, Jara, on studying, preparing?
Total would be about 6 months. So I am the global corporate communications director at my organization, and I have a daughter. And I've so like many people, full-time jobs and responsibilities. And the first time I studied while I was watching TV. I thought grad school Jira can do this without really having the study discipline or hygiene that I needed. So when I failed the first time, the only time I failed, I took it very differently. So I was studying every night after work from 2 to 3 hours. And on the weekends, I would take almost 4 to 5. So I just told myself, I said, I cannot fail again. And I'm thankful for my husband. I'm thankful for my company because I had the space to do so. But what made a big difference was setting time aside to be able to just focus on that.
And then doing the panel presentation, since you recently done one, would you say, how much time goes into one of these, just to give our candidates an idea of the prep work to put a panel presentation together?
Yeah, I thankfully was able to use of my own work experience,
Yeah.
but I look at the panel presentation and studying for the exam as parallel. So making sure you understand the difference between a goal, an objective, and a strategy and a tactic on your panel presentation helps you with the test. Then understanding the difference between an output and an outcome doing that in your presentation, making sure you understand primary and secondary research, understanding all those elements, that helps you for the test. So, and I think that you can only take the test after you pass a panel presentation. So really looking at the panel presentation as the introduction into getting to the next part and using those opportunities as parallel studies. So panel, making sure you understand and taking the advice and the feedback from the people who sit on the panel, because they're going to be the ones who give you like really good suggestions on where to study the most when we get ready for the test.
Good. Thank you for that. And Holly, what about you? If you wouldn't mind commenting on the timing, the amount of time you spent weekly or studying.
I think like once you really make up your mind and, because again, I was doing bits and pieces with each cohort, and then that in volunteering is huge because that gives you study materials for later as well. I volunteered to do notes quite a bit, and even when I didn't volunteer to do notes, I would do them anyway, which really helped me in the end. So I think there's a little study component, right, all along and kind of prepping for that final push. And that last cohort, I really focused on doing at least one of those activities within the modules and really putting it into practice. And so it felt a little bit more ingrained than just, okay, I'm reading, I'm studying, I'm gonna, just go over the material. So lots of time into the panel presentation. I practiced it in front of 2 different groups. I have a super supportive boss, and so we got a whole group together and I did it in front of them. They had no idea what I was talking about, but at least I got the practice, the terminology. But and then our Michigan School PR Association, anyone who's going for a panel right now, anyone who's earned their APR, we're like, yep, do your presentation in front of us and we can help. So definitely look for those groups. I think the questionnaire was a really tough part. So if you have a mentor, definitely have them look that over because it's almost like your panel presentation on paper. So making sure you get all of that in there. So that was time consuming. Once I set that date between learning, I passed the panel presentation and I set the date. It was studying in the car before the soccer game actually started. It was looking for any of those little moments. I had a whole binder with the APR study guide, all of my notes, everything by module. And just like the other 2, like when you had a second, I'll flip through this chapter, right? And just kind of review until you really felt good about it and go through those KSAs also. How confident are you in this one, this one, this one, this one? And if you're not as confident here, go back and study that one a little bit harder. So your study should be pretty strategic as well.
And Michael, are you still on the line? I was going to ask you how much time you spent on this, because this is quite an endeavor.
Thanks for asking. I actually do a little bit of external affairs in my day job.
Okay.
So I really try to put myself in a blue situation, like what would I do? So that was helpful to process some of the tactics. I will say it is very important that I rein myself back to not try to do tactics before understanding what our strategy is and before what the objective is. So that is a discipline that of all the things that I've gotten out of the course so far, that is something that I am working on 8 to 5 Monday through Friday.
And how far along are you, Michael, on the process of getting your APR? Is this your first cohort, your second?
This is my second cohort. I have a live project that I am preparing for my presentation.
Excellent.
That I don't know what percentage I would say that I'm through with, but I am working on my final presentation. Yes.
Excellent. And I love what you've done with when you talked about the tactics, the objective, the strategy of the tactics, you tied it all together. And that's so important. And that's what a panel presentation, that's what the panelists are really going to want to see is how well do you know the difference between those things and how are you applying theories, models to achieve those objectives what strategies you're using, and what tactics. So that it really is a culmination of everything. Thank you, Michael. It really is a culmination of everything you learn in this course. So do not be overwhelmed tonight. If you're seeing this for the first time and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how can I put all that together? That is really the result of going through this entire course and learning all about the RPI process, which you're going to start next week. So it's very important. RPI, again, is research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. And that's really the key and the heart and soul of the APR. So if you can at all, it's really important to attend those next several sessions, because that's where you're going to cover in depth the RPI process. Also, the summer session is really just focused on RPI. So we really want to be prepared to learn about RPI, because that will really help you also to do your presentation. So we're a third of the way through, hard to believe, but you're really making great progress because you're already a third of the way through. Next few weeks, is going to be RPI, and then you're going to look into crisis, leading PR functions, managing relationships, and then the panel presentation again. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already volunteered, to present either a scenario-based question or the module notes, as Holly mentioned, and April and Jared. It's important to get involved in some form of presenting, because it builds your confidence. And that's really what it's all about, is getting enough information under your belt. And you learn so much when you do these exercises. You learn even more when you have to present them. I think it was April or maybe it was Jara that mentioned you learn it like you're going to teach it. So speaking of our outstanding APRs, Jara, Holly, April, everyone give them a huge round of applause and thanks. We truly appreciate that they're here helping us with their wisdom, because it does take a village. And as Joy mentioned, thank you, Joy, for being on the call. I can always count on Joy in the chat. As she mentioned, this is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. So give yourself time and space. You can do this at your own pace, but you can do it. And that's the important part. The light bulb eventually does go on, and you will thrive once it does. So thank you again. Apply these modules, whatever, to your job each day. You're already probably doing it. We just didn't realize it until we studied for it. So again, have a great week. We'll see you next week, and we're going to start in on the RPI. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.